For too long people talked about Africa. Now it's Africa doing the talking and the world is finally listening, because what's rising here isn't just GDPs or trade figures, it's financial power, real power, the kind that can rewrite the rules of global money, and it all began the moment Africa stopped asking for permission and started building its own system, while Washington was busy sanctioning nations and Brussels was busy debating policies. Africa was busy connecting link by link, nation by nation with India, with BRICS, and with itself. This is not the Africa of handshakes and aid, this is the Africa of networks and leverage. Today, from Dakar to Dar es Salaam, African ports are humming with a new rhythm trade that no longer waits for approval from the West. Thanks to PAPS, the Pan-African Payment and Settlement System, a trader in Ghana can now pay a supplier in Kenya instantly without ever touching US dollars. Add India's UPI technology into that mix, and what you get is speed, trust, and transparency, a network built by Africans, for Africans, linked with partners who actually believe in mutual growth. That's the difference, my people. Partnership, not patronage. Right now, beneath our soil and across our skies, a new infrastructure is being laid. Fiber optic cables, the veins of the digital age, snake across the continent, connecting fintech hubs in Lagos, Kigali, and Cape Town. Young coders are turning mobile phones into mini banks. Farmers in Malawi are selling crops in rupees, and Nigerian entrepreneurs are receiving payments in Kenyan shillings, all through digital corridors powered by African innovation. This isn't the future. This is now, and standing beside Africa in this silent revolution is India, a nation that understands what it means to rise from the margins. India brings technology, Africa brings scale. India brings digital expertise, Africa brings the youngest workforce on earth. Together, they're creating an economic bridge across the Indian Ocean, one that can't be bombed, blocked, or bullied. Back to camera, some call it South-South cooperation. I call it the Global South's Declaration of Independence. Here's the irony: the more America sanctions, the more Africa learns to survive without America. Every restriction has become a lesson in self-reliance. Every cut-off bank has inspired a new fintech startup. Every blocked transaction has birthed a new workaround. And quietly, Africa's message to the world has changed from "please include us" to "watch how we build without you." Tell me that's not poetic justice. BRICS started as a club of 5, now it's becoming a movement of 50. Africa isn't joining to be a follower, it's joining to be a pillar. South Africa already hosts BRICS summits. Egypt, Ethiopia, and Nigeria are next in line. And with BRICS Pay on the horizon, a digital platform for member trade, Africa is positioning itself at the center of a multipolar economy. When BRICS meets PAPS and UPI, you get the skeleton of a world that no longer depends on Washington's permission slip. Behind all the acronyms BRICS, PAPS, UPI are people: a Senegalese student designing blockchain ledgers, a Ugandan banker training rural traders to use e-wallets, a South African developer building secure remittance apps for the diaspora. These are the architects of Africa's new wealth, not politicians, not foreign investors, just ordinary Africans who finally realized we don't need the world's validation to build our own value. Now the Western media is panicking. They call it de-dollarization. They call it fragmentation. But let's call it what it really is: diversification. For decades, Africa was told it needed the West to survive. Now the West needs Africa to stay relevant, and that's the shift nobody saw coming. African-Indian trade has crossed $100 billion this year. Digital payment volumes on PAPS have tripled in 12 months. Over 40% of new African startups are fintech-related. And BRICS investment into Africa's digital infrastructure now outpaces Western aid by 4-1. Those aren't projections, they're proof. Proof that when Africa leads, the world follows. Whispers are already circulating about the next step: a Pan-African digital currency, backed by gold, oil, and regional commodities. Some call it the Afrocoin. If that happens, if Africa creates a unified digital tender linked to PAPS, it won't just bypass sanctions. It will redefine what value means on this planet. Imagine the world trading in African units, not just American ones. That's not fantasy anymore. That's foresight to every African in the diaspora watching this. From London to Atlanta to Kingston, hear me clearly. This new system needs you too. Your remittances, your skills, your ideas, they're part of this global network. When you send money home through African channels, you're strengthening sovereignty. When you invest in African startups, you're financing freedom. We are one economy now, scattered by history, reunited by technology. Sometimes I think about how our ancestors traded long before borders, banks, or sanctions existed. Gold from Mali reached India centuries ago. Ivory from the Swahili coast crossed the same seas our cargo ships sail today. The roots have returned not by sail, but by signal. Maybe this hidden network isn't new at all. Maybe it's just Africa remembering itself. Make no mistake, challenges are coming. Cyber attacks, misinformation, political sabotage. The old powers won't surrender easily. But Africa has something they can't hack: collective will. Because once a people taste control over their own destiny, they don't give it back. Not again, not ever. So when you hear people ask, what's going on in Africa these days? Tell them this: Africa is done waiting. Africa is done begging. Africa is done being the subject of somebody else's story. We are writing our own headlines now, in rupees, in shillings, in naira, in code. And if the world wants to keep up, it better start learning to speak our language, the language of progress, partnership, and pride.
You see, for Africa, this isn't just economic, it's existential. For decades, our economies have been trapped in debt cycles tied to the West's currency, interest rates, and trade conditions. Now imagine having access to funding, trade credit, and payments without U.S. intermediaries. That's liberation, financial independence on a continental scale. And India plays a unique role here, not as a savior but as a bridge. It's part of BRICS, it trades with the West, but it also respects Africa's sovereignty. It doesn't dictate, it collaborates. That is why African central banks are now testing digital currency corridors with India's fintech firms. From the Pan-African Payment and Settlement System PAPS to India's Unified Payments Interface UPI, they're linking technologies that bypass Western control. Think of it like this: the US built the old road. Africa and India are quietly paving a new one side by side. Let's talk specifics. In 2024, Nigeria and India signed trade agreements worth over $15 billion, much of it settled outside the dollar system. Ethiopia and India outtrade energy and agricultural goods using direct settlement lines. Even small nations like Uganda and Tanzania are joining, building fintech backbones that connect to Indian payment rails. This isn't theory anymore. It's happening quietly, effectively, under the radar. So what does Washington do now? It's stuck. If it sanctions India, it risks alienating one of its biggest Asian partners. If it sanctions Africa, it pushes an entire continent deeper into the arms of BRICS and the East. It's a lose-lose. The America First playbook is colliding with a world that's no longer afraid. And here's the irony: the very policy meant to isolate others is isolating America instead. This is just the beginning. In the next decade, Africa's financial systems will be fully integrated, from Lagos to Nairobi, Cairo to Johannesburg. And the infrastructure, digital rails, fintech startups, blockchain corridors will link seamlessly with India's innovation. Together, they'll form a South-South network, a parallel economy that can trade, invest, and grow without permission from Washington. It's not anti-West, it's pro-freedom. They called it the developing world. But what if the developing world has been developing something the West never saw coming? A hidden system, a quiet revolution, a network built not on domination but cooperation. So when you hear about US sanctions next time, just remember, Africa isn't running away from the system. It's building a new one. If you found this story eye-opening, share it, because the world's financial future might just be written in the heart of the global South. And trust me, the next chapter is only getting started. In early 2025, a group of African finance ministers flew to New Delhi not for photo ops, but for something far more strategic. Behind closed doors, they discussed the creation of a clearing mechanism that would allow African exporters and Indian importers to settle payments using local currencies or digital tokens instead of dollars. The project is being tested under the radar, known internally as Project CEDA, short for South International Trade Architecture. Here's how it works. Instead of wiring money through New York or London, funds move directly between African and Indian financial institutions through a secure blockchain bridge, verified by both central banks. No SWIFT codes, no Western oversight. It's fast, untraceable by sanction watchdogs, and most importantly, completely legal. To make this possible, Africa needed more than political will, it needed technology. Enter India's digital revolution. For years, India built a system called UPI, Unified Payments Interface, the backbone of its cashless economy. It's fast, secure, and has processed billions of transactions at almost zero cost. African fintech pioneers saw the opportunity. Companies in Ghana, Kenya, and Nigeria began adapting the same model, connecting local apps to India's payment rails. And now PAPS, Africa's Pan-African Payment System, backed by the African Export-Import Bank, is learning from that blueprint. Think of PAPS and UPI as too powerful. They're about to merge, forming a financial stream that can flow from Mumbai to Accra, from Delhi to Lagos, bypassing Washington completely. In Washington, alarm bells are ringing. Analysts at the U.S. Treasury and State Department have begun tracking what they call currency fragmentation, the quiet dismantling of dollar dominance. But what they didn't expect was how fast Africa would adapt. One leaked internal memo which surfaced in late 2024 warned, India's payment collaborations in Africa could undermine the effectiveness of U.S. sanctions and reshape international finance in ways unfavorable to U.S. interests. Africa's rise is no longer theoretical, it's tactical, and the U.S. knows it's losing grip. Let's be honest, this is a chessboard. Every country wants control over how money moves. And the U.S. dollar has been the king piece for 80 years. But now there are new players and new moves. India is positioning its rupee as a settlement currency across the global south. China is pushing its digital yuan, and Africa. It's creating regional stablecoins backed by gold, oil, and real productivity. Sudan, Ghana, and Zimbabwe have all floated versions of commodity-backed currencies, a direct challenge to fiat manipulation. This is what I call the quiet rebellion. It's not about slogans or speeches. It's about architecture, building systems the West can't unplug. While politicians debate geopolitics, Africa's youth are already building the infrastructure of the future. Fintech startups across the continent like Flutterwave, Paystack, and Chipper Cash have begun integrating multi-currency APIs that can plug directly into Indian and Middle Eastern banking systems. This is the digital version of the non-aligned movement, not through ideology but through innovation. These young engineers might not call themselves revolutionaries, but they're dismantling centuries of economic dependency line by line, code by code. You can sanction oil, you can sanction trade, but you can't sanction ideas. Here's where it gets even more interesting. The BRICS bloc, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, has been laying the groundwork for a new international payment system. It's not fully public yet, but insiders call it BRICS Pay, a digital platform for interbank settlements between member and partner nations, and Africa. Several countries including Nigeria, Egypt, and Ethiopia are in talks to join or align with it. What that means is simple. Once BRICS Pay goes live, Africa won't just be trading with India, it'll be plugged into a multi-continent economic web that doesn't depend on the US or Europe. That's not just escaping sanctions. That's building a new world order from the ground up. But let's be real, every revolution has its risks. By bypassing the dollar, Africa and India are also taking on financial warfare from the West. Expect tighter IMF loan conditions. Expect US-backed 10GOs warning about transparency risks. Expect Western media narratives painting these systems as unsafe or corrupt. Because when power shifts, propaganda follows. But here's the truth the headlines won't say. This movement isn't anti-American. It's anti-dependence. And there's a difference. The 21st century Silk Road isn't made of silk. It's made of data, ports, and payment systems. From Mombasa to Mumbai, a new corridor of trade is forming, powered by technology, mutual respect, and shared ambition. And the irony: it is the very same Indian Ocean once controlled by colonial fleets that now connects to independent powers building their own destiny. Some in Washington argue for more sanctions, stricter controls, and financial containment. But others quietly admit it's too late. You can't sanction half the planet. You can't police every trade route. The game has changed. Even U.S. allies like Saudi Arabia and Turkey are now exploring trade settlements in local currencies. And every time that happens, the dollar weakens, not just economically but symbolically. Because power isn't just about money, it's about who decides how money moves. And that decision is slipping away. There's a storm coming in global finance, not a crash, but a realignment. In the next 5 years, expect two parallel systems, one led by the US and its allies, the other by BRICS with Africa and India at its digital core. Two currencies, two trade webs, two philosophies, one about control, the other about collaboration. And make no mistake, this isn't science fiction. It's already happening. For centuries, Africa was told to follow. Now it's leading, with India as a partner, not a patron, with technology as the weapon, not war, with trade as the language, not submission. This is the hidden network the world wasn't supposed to see, a network where Africa sets its own terms quietly, powerfully, unapologetically. So the next time you hear the US dollar is collapsing, don't panic. Understand that what's collapsing is a monopoly, and what's rising is multipolar freedom. Let's face it, the world isn't run from Washington anymore. It's run from everywhere. From Nairobi's tech corridors, to Delhi's fintech labs, to Dubai's trade floors, power is being rewritten, redistributed, and redefined. And in that equation, Africa is no longer the subject. Africa is the center. For the first time in modern history, our continent isn't waiting for permission to play the game. We're building the board ourselves. They said sanctions would isolate us. They said we'd crumble without their approval. But look around. Every sanction has become a seed, and those seeds have grown into systems, networks, and new partnerships that stretch far beyond the old colonial reach. Africa turned pressure into purpose, restriction into resilience, isolation into innovation. And now, the same nations that once dictated our trade policies are quietly lining up to join our markets, because Africa's idea that we can trade, pay, and prosper without the dollar isn't just our idea anymore. Latin America is testing it. The Middle East is exploring it. Asia has already built versions of it. What started as a local solution to sanctions has become a global movement toward financial independence, a new kind of globalization, one written in the language of equality, not dominance. Our grandparents fought for political freedom, our parents fought for cultural identity, and now, it's our generation's turn to fight for financial freedom. This time, not with protests or petitions, but with innovation, connection, and confidence. We are building what colonial powers could never imagine, a world where Africa decides its own value, sets its own prices, and holds its own currency high. That is legacy fulfilled. And now the same people who once called Africa too risky are calling it the future of global finance. Funny how quickly the story changes when the money moves, isn't it? Washington can't sanction every continent, London can't control every bank, and the world has finally learned that when Africa moves together, the dollar trembles. From Accra to Addis, Lagos to Lusaka, we are witnessing the rise of a self-sufficient Africa connected by trade, powered by youth, and guided by vision. The Pan-African dream our ancestors imagined is no longer a dream. It's data, it's deals, it's happening live in real time. Every digital transaction, every local currency exchange, every African-built fintech company. Each one is a step closer to a continent that answers to no one but itself, to Africa's young people. Never underestimate what you're building. You're not just coding apps or managing startups. You're rewriting the operating system of the world's economy. Every innovation you launch, every system you debug, every network you strengthen is part of something much bigger, the foundation of Africa's economic independence. You are the generation that turned what if into what's next, and the world is finally catching up. The hidden network isn't so hidden anymore. It's visible in every trade, every policy shift, every digital transaction connecting us to the world on our own terms. So when the world asks, who gave Africa the right to build its own system? Tell them we didn't ask, we earned it. We earned it through centuries of struggle, through resilience the world can't quantify, through unity they never expected. And now we don't need validation. We have verification on the blockchain, in the trade data, in the unstoppable progress that defines us. The old empire runs on sanctions. The new Africa runs on sovereignty. This is our financial revolution, and it's just beginning.